Hi, welcome. This is my first ever video of me talking about movies and books and things that I enjoy and just like profound thoughts on all of these things that I love to read and talk about, and finally talk to somebody in my phone who wants to hear about the things I think about when I watch movies or when I read books. So this is what this video will be for. To start, I would like to talk about these horror movies that I've been watching lately. And as somebody who doesn't really like horror that much or used to really not enjoy horror, I've really started to like kind of get grown on the genre a little bit because I used to not like them. And honestly, if I'm being honest, I still don't. I don't like ones with jump scares or ones that like are kind of like psychological horror, ones that just feel really realistic and are like really supernatural, like ghosts and like things like that. Oh, like ooh, like dead people, like oh, I can't. It's just so I can't do it. But I've lately been enjoying a lot of horror that kind of involves like female monster and female horror, and like centered around kind of the female character. And when I'm saying the female character, I really don't mean like the female horror character, like for example like in Psycho, Marion, or like Laurie in Halloween. Well, yes, I do like those movies and they are good in their own ways. I don't think that they really portray the exact kind of female identity that I'm thinking of. They don't portray the exact female identity that I'm thinking of. Oh my god. They don't portray the exact female identity that I'm thinking of when I'm thinking of horror movies. And when I'm thinking about horror movies when it comes to females, I'm thinking of more like a female like monster, like female rage, female anger, female kind of, I'm gonna say this a lot in this video, kind of unsanctioned, kind of out of control, or what kind of society perceives to be out of control. Before I kind of define what a female monster is, I want to get started with this video to talk about kind of what is a monster, what is a female monster, and what about her is monstrous and what about her is like sexual. But I want to focus this video on two movies with female monster characters, Carrie and Jennifer's Body. And when I specifically when I talk about Carrie, I was talking about the book and the movie. Mostly the book. I've seen the movie once, but like I think the book honestly I enjoyed more, so I'll be talking more about the book. But these two characters, I'll be talking about the character of Carrie, obviously Jennifer, and how their female like monstrosity kind of came about and how that is intrinsically tied to their sexuality and female identity, and how they're kind of similar and different in those respects. Let's get started. So what is a monster? And because before I want to start this video, I want to kind of define what is a monster and how can we kind of define that in a horror movie. A monster can be seen as something that's kind of supernatural or something that is horrifying, but in like say Harry Potter, for example, like a hippogriff or a mermaid isn't necessarily perceived as horrifying or a monster per se. It's kind of perceived as like almost like a normal thing in their world, something that already exists, something that is normal to kind of be seen, but they're not really perceived as like horrifying the way a monster what we might be thinking of. So I think that's what I like to say is kind of the defining trait of a monster, is that within its respective society it shouldn't really exist, or its existence is kind of defying kind of a boundary. What is this kind of identity of a monster, and what is defying of its boundaries? What is that? Well, I would like to call that abjection, as defined by the philosopher Julie Kristeva. She kind of defined abjection as kind of this idea of crossing over boundaries and limits and things kind of in society and things that shouldn't exist. In simple terms, it's something that is outside that should be inside, or something that is being seen that shouldn't be seen. For example, like if I open the door when someone's going to the bathroom, I open the stall, and I'm like, oh my god, I shouldn't have seen that. It's kind of like that, where I shouldn't be seeing that, and the fact that I am seeing it is kind of jarring, it's kind of horrifying. And obviously that's not like horrifying, that'd be embarrassing, but you kind of understand what I'm saying. Something that is being seen that shouldn't be seen, something that exists that shouldn't exist. It's kind of defying what society is defining as almost like existable, like it's defying what in that particular society it is. But what about when it comes to a female monster, what comes to a male monster, what comes to kind of like a gender ambiguous monster. Like, what about them is making them monstrous? Well, if you think of the monster, something that kind of defines social boundaries, then obviously what defines a male monster, what defines a female monster in certain worlds, especially in a world that's supposed to be, you know, like a real world, like a horror movie set in like realistic, like America, or realistic, just like the world in general. If there's a male monster and a female monster, and a monster is defined as something that is defying social boundaries, then what defines those monsters is going to be different if you think about it. So for a male monster, let's take, for example, Dracula or Hannibal, people that are kind of engaging in these taboo acts. They're kind of seen as almost like respected, and they're almost seen as like almost like hot sometimes. They're like, oh, like yeah, he's eating people, yeah, he's a vampire, but like he's hot. And even characters like the killer in Scream, like yeah, he's a murderer, but he's hot, so it's okay. But that can kind of constitute for the fact that he's a man, so he kind of can get away with being a monster, being this kind of devourer of human flesh, or being this murderous character because he's a man, and he's not really a monster. He kind of can do whatever he wants. But when it comes to a female monster, that's different. There's a difference between how a female, say, vampire, or a female like devourer of flesh, or a female like someone who's like a psycho, someone who's crazy, how they're kind of different and how they're portrayed different. What is that female character doing that is defying boundaries? Jennifer's Body and Carrie, let's define what about them makes them female monsters. Both of these movies feature a woman who is going through kind of a ritual, or kind of a changing almost of their selves, from like an older self to a previous self. For Jennifer, you know, she gets sacrificed by these band members, and they turn her into a succubus. Not on purpose, but you know, she goes from being like an average high school girl to being a succubus. And then in Carrie, in the beginning, she gets her period, which is a signifier of her development of telekinesis, which is, you know, her power to kind of just control things with her mind. These two women become abject, they become othered, they become something that shouldn't exist. They become monsters because they are something that is abject. And what defines something as abject is usually something that is dirty, unclean, unsanitary, or like unpure. Keyword unpure. For example, Jennifer, she became a succubus because she was sacrificed as a virgin. But as we know in the movie, she tells us that she isn't a virgin, that she had sex before. And so that's why her transition fails. And that's why she becomes this monster. And then as for Carrie, she becomes a monster because she gets her period. And all these people are looking at her and they're like, oh my God, like, Carrie, like, you got your period? Like, it was in the shower scene. Oh my God, Carrie, you have your period? Like, I can't look at you. And it's kind of showing, like, yeah, these two characters, their sexuality is kind of intrinsically tied to the reason why they're monsters. The reason why Carrie's a monster is because, you know, her, like, puberty was her getting her puberty, her becoming a woman, becoming her sexual being, was also her becoming the monster. It's intrinsically tied to that. And same for Jennifer. Her sexuality, or her sexual promiscuity, or her sex positive life, or just the fact that she had sex once, you know, she's now a succubus. Now she's this monster. Both of these movies, they portray female sexuality. I would like to say that these two movies are kind of explaining kind of the repression of female sexuality and the consequences of that repression, and the society kind of trying to tell women kind of what to do with their bodies, or telling women like what they should or shouldn't share with the world, or telling women to what extent women can be proud of their sexual selves, their puberty, their, you know, wanting to have sex, or just kind of being as like wanting to have pleasure the way that men can have pleasure. For example, in Carrie, in the book, she tries to kind of suppress her sexuality kind of to please her mother to a certain extent. She tries to, you know, she has to go in the closet because her mom is forcing her to go. In the movie, she, you know, tells her friend like, I need to be home from the prom in order to make my mom happy. Even when she meets her neighbor and she tells the neighbor like, what are your boobs, like what are they doing, like why do you have them, I thought only bad girls get them. And she kind of wants to know what they are, and she's like, you know, like mesmerized by this woman in this bikini laying in her backyard, and she's like, oh my god, like I need to see it's on the other side. And then in the end she gets killed by her mom with obviously a knife, which is, if you don't realize, is this long knife and almost like a phallic, kind of like a dick, like long and like getting stabbed with her, almost like kind of this masculinity, this patriarchal society kind of killing her in the end, kind of symbolizing that, you know, like this suppression of, you know, women just aren't able to really express this female sexuality of themselves within themselves. However, in Jennifer's Body is very similar. She tries to, while she doesn't necessarily suppress her hunger for people, she still goes and eats boys. The thing is though, she only eats boys. When Needy asks her, you know, you're killing people, she says, no, I'm only killing boys. I'm not killing girls. You know, I'm suppressing that side, which also can kind of open a can of worms of like, if she's not killing girls, why is she avoiding that? Why is she suppressing that, you know, engagement of eating a girl? Why would eating a girl be wrong? Because it's almost like that pleasure of, you know, enjoying the woman is wrong, implying that, you know, her sexual orientation, her sexuality is wrong. Like she cannot enjoy eating women. And you can tell, you know that she's repressing it, because at the end she says, oh, I go both ways. Like, you know, I could eat a woman, but I'm choosing not to. So she's kind of repressing that. However, in the end, she does get killed by Needy with that phallic knife. Again, getting kind of stabbed by kind of the patriarchy in general. However, the movie doesn't end kind of the way Carrie does, where it's like, you know, Carrie dies, and that's kind of the end of the movie, kind of symbolizing, you know, she's gone, like, you know, patriarchy killed her. But in the end, like, while Needy does kill her, she gets revenge on the boys who did that to her. Almost like, yeah, she had to die, but I'm gonna go get revenge on the fact that she had to even suppress that in general. Like, I'm gonna go get revenge on them. In the end, obviously it was happening in the beginning, but she ends up going to that mental hospital, and it's kind of showing like that unsanctioned female rage, unsanctioned female sexuality, like being under control, and like how that happens. And I think that's such an interesting, this kind of idea of this unsanctioned female, people wanting to suppress that, but it kind of resides in you, but society doesn't want it to exist. I think that these two movies are so interesting in the way that they portray kind of female characters, female sexuality, the sanctioning of female sexuality, and the way that females like feel like they can't really express their sexual side of themselves, or the way that it's kind of demonized and kind of seen as monstrous. And I think that it is something that is such a cool idea to kind of involve in horror, in the way that, like, while you think horror can be like, oh my god, blood, gore, dead bodies, zombies, it's like, no, it can be very intrinsically like social and very like commentary on kind of the world today and the issues that are kind of going on. And it's such an interesting way to kind of portray the feelings that are evoked when it comes to that, and like the anger and rage that women feel when it comes to feeling that suppression of, you know, their sexual selves, you know, having the right to choose, to have autonomy for their body, being able to do what they want with their bodies. I think honestly the existence of female characters who are monstrous because of their femininity, I think it is a very important notion that is such a good idea for horror movies. Anyways, thank you for watching my TED Talk about horror movies, and I had such a good time talking about them and getting to share them with you. I hope you enjoyed this video. Subscribe to my non-existent channel down below. Say hi to my cat that's sleeping. I don't know if you can see her, but she's been listening to me this whole time. Yeah, about horror movies. Bye!